You're looking here on my left, a very expensive, and I would consider the top of the line spotting scope in the market. This is the ATX 95 from Swarovski with a 30 to 70 power zoom. This here on my right is, I would consider, a more budget-friendly option at almost 1/10 the cost of this Swarovski, which is going to be probably in the almost $6,000 range with some very convenient options you might want to add, versus this one at closer to $600 all in. So is there any real advantage to having the more expensive scope? Honestly, I usually gravitate to the theory of buy once, cry once. I want a quality product that I can know is going to do the job exactly how I want it done every time, to the best of the ability of the equipment. So honestly, I wasn't thinking that there would be much chance that a cheaper scope was going to have any ability to compete in its fit and finish and its feature sets and the capabilities that I need it to be able to do. However, I get in these conversations with people that I am around, friends or family, neighbors who perhaps that I might share an opportunity with for hunting or for birding, or if we're out, photoing, doing photography for wildlife or scenery. And if they get behind this scope, and if they've never been behind a spotting scope before, maybe they're used to using binoculars, conventional telescopes for astronomy or others, and they see my spotting scope and they say, hey, can I look through that? And I let them use the tool. They say, wow, that's amazing. Look how much I can see so far away. We've seen animals up to 10 miles away with this. And that's incredible under the right lighting conditions for somebody who's never looked through something like this, for them to see what the capabilities of this tool are. But inevitably they say, wow, I want something like that. What does that cost? What would it cost for me to get that? I want to buy one. And I say, you don't want to know. And they say, oh, no, come on, just tell me. You can tell me. Tell me what it costs. And I say, oh, you really don't want to know. And they say, yes, I do. And I finally cave and I say, well, this scope here is probably going to run you $4,000, $5,000, even $6,000 to get a scope of this caliber. And that shuts down the conversation really, really quickly. But I've come to realize that these are still people who have recognized that they like what this can do. They like the opportunity to be able to see things so far away and to do the birding or the photography or the hunting activities that they want to perform. And they want to do it to a higher level than they had been doing with the tools they've already used. And so I find myself at a disadvantage in saying, just leaving the conversation at, well, that's $6,000. You can't afford it, so why even think about it? When I'd like to be able to suggest an alternative. And maybe that alternative is a $2,000 scope, right? But you would intuitively believe that there's still a disadvantage between the $2,000 scope and the $6,000 scope. But you're still out of pocket $2,000 or $3,000 or whatever it might be for the mid-grade scope. And so I wanted to see if there was any reason why a person would consider a $600 scope as a viable alternative. Is there anything that this scope can do that this could even come close to being able to do just as well? Or is this a waste of money? Is this a glorified paperweight? And so we did some side-by-side testing where you'll see in this video where we look out to 2,600 yards and we're looking at objects, some towers in very, very low light conditions up to 45 minutes past daylight, past sunset, which is well past, visible daylight. It was beyond the time I could even physically see the towers with my naked eye, but we were still able to see images through the scopes beyond that point. And we honestly were having a hard time seeing a difference between the two scopes. Now, that's not to say that there aren't advantages to this scope and perhaps disadvantages with this scope, but they were much closer than I honestly expected them to be in their performance and capabilities. And so hopefully you'll be able to see. Now you'll see that the limitation is honestly with the phone scope or the phone digiscoping capabilities, because it's filmed. I tried to get a smartphone camera to take the same images through both scope lenses to be able to then have you, the viewer, see as close to a comparable image as possible. So there's going to be limitations as to what the phone and that phone camera truly can do when you're comparing the two side by side. But if you want to take my word for it, the view itself was very, very comparable. There were things that, or excuse me, I should say, there weren't really anything that I couldn't resolve with the Swarovski that I couldn't get an equally focused image of with the SvBony. That said, like I said, there are certainly differences. The Swarovski has a much wider field of view than the SvBony. I was estimating somewhere about 10 to 15 feet at about 2,000 yards, which is, for some, they're going to say that's not insignificant. You know, when you're looking at a field of view and it might be a few 100 yards wide, you know, to have one scope that can see 15 yards more than that might be something that's really important to somebody. But at the end of the day, a lot of the other physical features like eye relief are very, very similar to my eye. I could get into both with my glasses. In fact, maybe a slight advantage to this SvBony where the at max power on the Swarovski at my eye, the lens of my glasses actually touches, which is a little bit annoying if you have glasses, whereas it didn't on the SvBony. You're going to notice a lot more similarities, honestly, than differences. You know, even the little rubberized armor on these is very, very similar between the two of them. Both have the ability for the extending objective lens. Both have the opportunity to put on some sort of a stay-on case. In this case, for the Swarovski, this is a almost $350 option that you have to buy separately, whereas for the SvBony, this case comes free with when you buy the scope. So what is it, you know, at the end of the day, what's going to be the best scope for you? You know, that is going to be probably dependent upon whether or not a $5,000 or $6,000 or even a $2,000 or $3,000 scope option is even an alternative for you. But when I was comparing these side by side, I can honestly say that there was I was pleasantly surprised at the capability of something like this being, you know, it still is it's a double ED glass. It's, you know, it's got a big objective lens. It's got a wide zoom capability, 25 to 75. It has the features that I would want to see in a big scope like this. And at the end of the day, I could make something like this work. So, quick little feature, couple of things to compare here. Both of these have the ability to adjust at the barrel here just by loosening that. You can adjust those on and off. Same thing here with this SvBony. If I turn that around, you can see the knob. You just unscrew that and that can spin, so you can adjust the placement of that relative to your tripod. That's a neat feature that you don't see in every scope, that collar. So that's a useful feature here. The focus ring on the SvBony is tighter than the Swarovski, which, you know, I like a looser. It's easier to move even one-fingered if necessary than the tighter focus ring. You know, both eyepieces have the ability to extend to adjust for that eye relief if you don't have glasses. I mean, honestly, there are probably more similarities than there are differences. The one physical difference of note, though, is this SvBony is 24 ounces heavier than this Swarovski. We're talking 1.5 pounds heavier. So for some, that's going to be a non-issue. If I'm using the scope exclusively out of the vehicle like I do, that's a non-issue. It doesn't go anywhere but from the car to a glassing point. I don't care about the extra weight. If you're packing it into the hills, though, if this is your one and done scope and you need it to be packed in 10 miles, and you've also got your camp on your back or other hunting equipment or whatever you might have, an extra 1.5 pounds is a considerable weight penalty. And that is something to think about. Now, you could just go to a smaller scope. This brand has smaller scopes as well. Certainly Swarovski would have smaller scopes. There are lighter, smaller options from a number of brands, of course. So that might be a better consideration than worrying so much about it. For our purposes, we're here really more to compare the capabilities of the scope. Can I get the same viewing experience from this one that I can get from the more expensive option? And at the end of the day, it's really, really close, to be honest with you. Okay, this is the SvBony, SvBony. This is the double ED glass APO 25 to 75 by 100 millimeter objective. This is about it's a tad over 2,000 yards, what we're looking at right here. This is evening. We're a little less than an hour before dark, before sunset. About 54, 55 minutes before actual sunset. And we're comparing this scope with the Swarovski ATX 95 with the 30 to 70 power eyepiece. Conditions here, just a very, very light breeze. The hill we're looking at right now is currently in a bit of shadow with a cloud. It's not getting direct sunlight. It's a fairly warm evening in the low 80s. This is at the max zoom. If we back it out, from 75 down to 25. And this is being filmed with just a digiscope adapter and a smartphone camera. Okay, this is the Swarovski ATX with the 95 millimeter objective lens and the 30 to 70 power zoom. We're here looking just over 2,000 yards. We're here about 50 minutes before sunset. We just had some clouds out that were covering. The sun was a little bit blocked on this particular hillside. And now that's just broke, and now we have sunlight directly on this spot again. We're here at the max zoom of 70 power. If we back it down, this is being filmed on a smartphone with a digiscope adapter. So here's the 30 power. If I move the phone a little bit side to side, you can see a little bit more of the image that you would be seeing on the sides. Is kind of more of the edge-to-edge clarity and your field of view, which, as we're comparing this with this SvBony APO with the 100 millimeter objective lens, it is notable that the field of view here at 30 power on the Swarovski is actually wider than the field of view at 25 power on the SvBony, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, SvBony scope. So this is the SvBony 25 to 75 by 100, and as I've noted previously, the one distinction I can clearly see between the two scopes is just the field of view, and I currently have this set at approximately 30 power, as close to it, obviously on the dial as possible, where the Swarovski sitting next to me here is also at 30 power. And as I look through both of them, the Swarovski's field of view includes, if you can see in the immediate far right of the frame here is a juniper. If I bring it just to the inside of that juniper, it's not in the image, and if I bring it just to the outside of the juniper, it's in the image. So if you imagine on the Swarovski, that juniper is in full view in the right frame of the video, and then if you now look to the very far left, there is another juniper just inside the far left frame of the video, and where it's currently outside of the video, now it's currently inside of the video, centered about up and down. Those two juniper bushes, trees, if you will, that one in the far right and the one in the far left, if you imagined this centered between the two, and sorry for it jumping around, on the Swarovski scope, you can see both the outer edge of the right one and the outer edge of that left juniper. Whereas, as you can see here, through the digiscope, the SvBony is just to the inside of both of those juniper bushes. Now, from experience, those juniper bushes are probably anywhere from 5 to 7 feet wide. And so we're talking a difference at this 2,000 yards of somewhere in the neighborhood of probably an extra anywhere from, let's say, 8 to 16 feet of extra field of view in the Swarovski at its lowest setting, compared, hopefully, as apples to apples as we possibly can get here. Okay, now here is the Swarovski and the ATX 95, again with the limitations of the digiscoping setup here with the smartphone camera. It's hard to see what is actually visible through the scopes with just the naked eye. Through the scope without the digiscoping adapter, this tree, this little bush to the left, and this now bush that is on the far right, both of those are visible, all but perhaps the last foot of them is cut off at this yardage, this 2,000 yards away, when centered between the two. So you can see in this frame at 30 power, you can see parts of both bushes, both of these juniper trees here. Obviously, you can see that the frame is slightly cut off just by the width of the phone view capabilities. But when looking and comparing side by side with the SvBony and this the APO 25 to 75 by 100, it is slightly wider. Here at 2,000 yards, probably, as I'm just estimating, just based on how big I think those junipers are, I would say somewhere between 8 and 16 feet extra field of view. Here we are again, back with the SvBony APO 25 to 75 by 100. Here again, 2,000 yards. The sun is now out. We are a little under 50 minutes until sunset time. We're here at 25 power. Let's take it into the max of 75. Again, this is not perfect in that it's trying to collect the image of the glass through a digiscope adapter on a smartphone camera. Trying to get as much of a side-by-side comparison here as possible. I'm going to play with the focus here just a little bit on the scope itself and see if that does anything to the image itself. That is one thing I noticed about this SvBony scope, is if it's focused at the lowest power, 25, I have to refocus at the highest power if I zoom in. Just a tad. And then vice versa, which I do sometimes have to do with the Swarovski, but doesn't seem to be as often. And so in this case, where we started at low power and we zoomed in, it may be an effect that the camera is not seeing through an already focused image. So we'll see on our next test here if it's different. Okay, here again with the Swarovski ATX 95. We're at 30 power. We'll take it in to the 70 power max on this particular eyepiece. We are now about 45 minutes before sunset. The sun is getting at a lower angle in the sky here, but it's still heating up that hillside. No wind of note. It's a fairly calm evening. I will say we are dealing with the limitations of this digiscope and the phone itself. The roots at the bottom of this tree, I can see clearly through both scopes when I'm looking just with the naked eye, but they both seem to resolve a little bit less clear with the phone image that is being recorded. SvBony with about 45 power on the dial and the zoom, and here about 2100 yards. The Swarovski at about 45 power, here again at 2100 yards. Okay, this is the SvBony APO 100mm at 75 power. This is 67 yards away on the resolution chart. We zoom out. To 25 power. Okay, this is a Swarovski ATX 95 at 70 power on the resolution chart at 67 yards. Come out to 30 power. Okay, this is the SvBony APO with a 25 to 75 by 100 millimeter objective lens. This is at 75 power on the scope, and then the phone is at 8 power on the digital zoom. 67 yards. This is a Swarovski with a 95 millimeter objective. It's at 70 power zoom and 8 power on the optical zoom of the camera on the phone. This is during a pretty heavy rainstorm with pretty high winds at 67 yards. This is the SvBony at max zoom of 75 power. This fence post again is about 69 yards away. This is the Swarovski ATX 95 at its max power of 70. This fence post is about 69 yards away. Okay, the SvBony, 370 yards to this chart. This is 4 power on the digital zoom. We're at 70 power on the optical zoom of the scope itself. And into 8 power on the digital zoom. Here's a Swarovski at 70. Zoomed into 4 power on the digital zoom. I'd say overall it has just a it's a noticeable but slight increase in the clarity, in the sharpness, if you will, of the image. And you can see it just as well when you're looking through the scopes, but both scopes, absent the little bit of the focusing challenge that the phone is having, they're far clearer than what we're seeing here on the video image. There's 8 power. Again, this is the Swarovski. This is the ATX 95. We're about 370 yards from this little chart. Some fairly windy conditions. These are the kind of conditions that make glassing challenging with any scope. This is the hillside. They're about 11 miles away through the SvBony. Again, a lot of distortion in the atmosphere and the air between us and that distance, with the winds, the changes in the temperature, with the rain this afternoon, the hot of the sun. We're going from 80, 90 degree temps to temps in the 60s. can zoom out a little bit. You can see the contrast between this hillside in the foreground, which is closer to between 1,000 yards and a mile, and the distant hillside there at about, like I said, a little over 10 miles, between 10 and 11 miles away. You can see the waves of heat, if you will, as with the direction of the wind there. This hillside is over 10 miles away, giving you an idea of the conditions. This is with this much wind and just thermal energy in the air, you get a lot of distortion, no matter how clear the glass is. So this is the Swarovski, this is the ATX, it's at its max zoom. And this is about what I'm seeing with the naked eye. This is a fairly close representation. If I pull it back out, you can see this hillside in the foreground, which is closer to about a mile away, maybe 1,000 yards or so, compared to the hillside there about 11 miles away. Okay, this is a SvBony, SvBony EED glass APO 25 to 75 by 100 millimeter spotting scope. Looking through a digiscoping adapter and a smartphone camera. Sunset was at 9:14 p.m. It is currently 9:43 and 18 seconds. This is at the lowest zoom, 25 power. That is just under 50 power. And all the way into 75. And this is nearly a half an hour after sunset. Okay, this is the Swarovski ATX 95 millimeter with the 30 to 70 power eyepiece. So sunset was at 9:14 p.m. It's currently 9:46 p.m. We're looking at about 2,600 yards away at these towers. This is at the minimum power of 30 power on this scope. About right there before that's a little over 50 power before it starts to darken. And then the max zoom of 70 power. This is the SvBony with the double ED glass, APO 25 to 75 by 100 millimeter objective lens. Currently at about 2,600 yards, and it is currently 9:54 and 38 seconds. Sunset was at 9:14 p.m. So well over a half an hour past sunset. We are at 25 power zoom at this point. That's about 38. We're using a digiscoping adapter with a smartphone camera. Beyond about 45, we begin to lose useful light. And the phone has a hard time focusing in the low light. This is about 47 power. This is about 54 power. And all the way up to its max of 75, the image is all but unusable. It is currently 9:56 p.m. Okay, this is the Swarovski ATX, the 95mm objective at 30 power. This is a 30 to 70 power eyepiece. It is currently 9:52 p.m. Sunset was at 9:14 p.m. It's currently at 30 power. Note, in comparison with the SvBony, however that's pronounced, it has a noticeably wider field of view at its lowest setting. If we bring it into about 45 power, still have enough light. This is at about 2,600 yards. But beyond about 51 power, it's having trouble focusing. This is the digiscoping adapter with a smartphone camera. All the way into 70 power, and it's almost impossible to get a usable image at this point. It is currently 9:53 p.m. Again, sunset was at 9:14 p.m. Still usable at the lowest setting, 30 power. All right, here's what we're working with. It is officially too dark to see. We're 45 minutes past daylight. The hilltop we were looking at is no longer visible. The towers, at least, are no longer visible with the naked eye. These are the scopes we're working with. On the left, you have the Swarovski. It's the ATX model. 95mm objective zoom, 30 to 70 power on the eyepiece. And on the right, you have this SvBony, S-V-B-O-N-Y. And it is slightly larger objective lens at 100mm. And it's a 25 to 70 power eyepiece. Both of similar size and dimensions. Both have a lot of similarities in their feature sets, but there certainly is going to be a difference. I mean, one is over $4,000, the other is under $900 retail. Fit and finish, of course, of the Swarovski is top of the line. The SvBony is, I've yet to find any significant issues. The eye relief seems adequate. Only real complaint I could possibly make between the two would be that the barrel focus, while similar looking to the Swarovski, is not nearly as smooth. It seems a little tighter. The Swarovski is a smoother focusing mechanism. I also noticed that when I zoom into its max setting of 75, if I focus it at 75 and then I zoom out to 25, it has to then be refocused, where the Swarovski does do that some of the time, but most of the time it maintains its focus if it's focused at the max power, the max zoom of 70, and I take the power down to the 30, then it's still in focus to my eye. All right, so for a little recap here, I'll give you my 2 cents. As I said at the beginning of the video, I was pleasantly surprised at how well this this cheaper scope was able to do against the very expensive but top-tier glass Swarovski. I mean, in the end, it's there's a definite advantage to the Swarovski. It's definitely clearer, especially when you're looking at it just with the with your eye and not through the phone scope. The phone seems to have an ability to adjust a little bit for the lack of clarity that you're going to get out of a cheaper scope like this. So there is a little bit of some compensation there that's happening. Not a lot. Like I said, I was definitely pleasantly surprised at how well it did in comparison. You know, being, what did we decide, a tenth of the cost nearly. So there are certainly going to be folks watching this video for whom a $5,000 or a $6,000 spotting scope is just not even in the cards, nor would be a $2,000 or a $3,000. And so at the end of the day, a scope like this is going to be perfect. It's going to do everything you need, and really you're not going to know the difference because you're not going to have that $4,000 or $5,000 scope sitting next to it. And for, you know, getting up close and personal with some birds, or trying to pick out some animals out of a bush at 1,000 yards or something, this scope it's going to get it done. It is not going to be it's not as fine a precision movements with the focus. The clarity's just not quite there like we've discussed. It's heavier. You know, there certainly are some downsides, but it also leaves, you know, $4,000 in your pocket. So at the end of the day, you get what you pay for, obviously. And if you got the money to invest in the higher end glass, then the Swarovski or a Koa or some other top tier glass is going to serve you well, and you're probably not going to regret your decision. But if that kind of cash is not in the cards, then I would not hesitate recommending something like this. This SvBony big 100mm spotter. So any questions you might have, or comments or concerns, put them down below. Thanks for watching.